So there are three varieties of misery that people experience in the world. Adhibhautik, Adhyatmik, Adhidevik. Adhibhautik is physical suffering. Nature has ways to test the body. Actually, it's necessary to some extent that human beings experience some physical suffering. Because if we did not perceive the physical pain of the body, survival in the body would have been very difficult. There's something in medical science which is known as the hygiene hypothesis. Quite simply, some people, because from starting from a very young age, they are too obsessed with cleanliness. So what happens is that the body does not build its immune system to fight against these germs. So from too much cleanliness, the body becomes sick. So that's called the hygiene hypothesis. Yes, some amount of physical suffering is necessary in the world. Physical pain, that is. I should have made this distinction between pain and suffering. Because physical body can be in a certain state, but if your inner well-being is settled, you need not be suffering because of the pain of the body. It reminds me of one incident. I discovered this simple fact from a very young age, that what we are calling pain is just at the level of our perception. I question actually if you're actually experiencing physical pain. So once, this was about maybe I was, let's say, 14 years of age. So we're in the school, playing in the playground, and I fell over and I hit my knee. And as if nothing happened, I just simply continued on the way. Waiting in the waiting line at the end of the break, I noticed all the students just gazing at my leg. And I was wondering, what the hell are they looking at? So I looked down, noticed the wound, it was pouring with blood. Immediately the pain came bursting forth in my experience. When I had not noticed it, when I was unaware of the pain, when I was unaware that I had become wounded, I was totally oblivious to that. There are some doctors in Europe who are teaching their patients self-anesthesia. That is, through a certain type of hypnosis, they will teach their patients to bring themselves to a certain deep state of hypnosis, and being still totally wide awake, they will go through surgery, go through operations, and they are not experiencing the pain. You know, it might sound like an exaggeration, but if you come to a certain level of self-mastery within yourself, you can be oblivious to physical pain. It reminds me of, I don't know if some of you have heard of certain Buddhist monks who, as a sign of political protest, they'll just pour gallons of gasoline over themselves, set themselves on fire, and in their experience they continue sitting in the meditation until the whole body is reduced to ashes. So what we're calling pain, even physical pain, is actually at the level of our perception. What other kind of variety of misery do human beings experience? Some amount of misery that is triggered because of changes in the environment or in the natural world. Floods, meteorites, earthquakes, volcanoes, shifts of the tides, geological imbalances. So that can trigger also a certain amount of suffering for a human being. But then there's the third variety of suffering. Actually, these first two types of suffering, I do not really consider them as the true cause of suffering. The true cause of our sufferings is Adhyatmik, which is quite simply that at the level of our experience, man is disconnected from the source of his creation. So, if we are living in life with a certain sense of alienation, what brings about alienation? If you look at it in one way or another, it's always connected to the ego. The ego, which gives you a very strong impression, at least in your experience, of being separate from the whole. And are you really separate from the whole? You might think, okay, this body is separate. These are the boundaries of my body. But let's look more deeply into it. The quantum physicists, they're saying that particles are always melting and merging into one another. So that means, for example, there is actually a physical link between you and, let's say, the wall behind you. Particles are always blending and merging. And they also found that at the level of the subatomic, all the particles are interconnected in a vast chain of cause and effect. What this actually means is, let's say there's a change that happens in the atom of your body. At exactly the same moment, there's going to be a change that happens to some atom in some faraway galaxy. So, the atoms of your body are actually interconnected with the atoms of, let's say, faraway galaxies. Or can you really say that you're separate from the environment? It's just like a flower in a garden. Now, can you really say that this flower is separate from the whole? How many forces are involved in the existence of just a single flower? From the sunlight, to the season, to the soil, to the right amount of water, to all the necessary ingredients that are taking place, just for the existence of a single flower. So, usually, this is what's creating a great sense of alienation in human life, that we are perceiving the ego, the separate self, the separate identity, as though we are separate from the whole. So this type of alienation is called Adhyatmik. It's a more subtle kind of suffering, a spiritual kind of suffering. When I say suffering, please don't misunderstand. I don't necessarily mean that you're being tormented. I don't necessarily mean you're going through some tremendous, overwhelming agony. Just simply, in this moment, how silent and peaceful are you? There's a certain statement by a French philosopher. I may have mentioned it, some of you were here to the other class, named Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal, he said something very simple. When I first read it, this must have come out of enormous insight. He said, one of the causes of human suffering is just simply that he's not able to sit down silently in a quiet room. That has a lot of truth to it. This is actually something that you learn in meditation. Sit, totally sitting, just wakeful of nothing else except this present moment. But most people, if we just try to sit, mind always wants to be preoccupied. So most people, they just try to sit down silently. They feel this eruption of energy coming to the surface. And they feel that they must channel this energy in some way. Mind is always goal-oriented, moving from point A to point B. So if you can just sit here doing absolutely nothing, you can be in a great state of celebration within yourself. You can have a great party just sitting, doing absolutely nothing.